complete exoneration, no collusion, no obstruction. Thank you very much.
Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Rafael P. Roman. President Trump is calling it a complete and total exoneration. But is he right? Attorney General William Barr briefed Congress on the long-awaited Mueller report on Sunday, writing that the special counsel did not find that the Trump campaign or anyone associated with it conspired with Russia in its efforts to influence the 2016 election. But it's a different story when it comes to obstruction. According to Barr's summary, Mueller did not conclude that the president committed a crime, but he did not exonerate the president either. Instead, Mueller punted the final decision to Barr, a Trump-appointed official who, along with Deputy AG Rod Rosenstein, decided that there was not sufficient evidence to prove the president committed a crime. That is not sitting well with Democrats, including House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler. The New York congressman tweeted that, quote, "In light of the very concerning discrepancies and final decision-making at the Justice Department, we will be calling Attorney General Barr to testify before the House Judiciary in the near future." The back and forth comes as the president continues to face both federal and state investigations right here in New York, a reminder that this is far from over. And for more on this story, we are now joined by CNN legal analyst and Columbia Law School lecturer in law, Jennifer Rogers, a former federal prosecutor, and political analyst and New York Times best-selling author, Ellis Henican. Jennifer, Ellis, thanks so much for joining us today. Jennifer, let me start with you. Over the weekend, the president said that that the report, or the summary of the report, was a complete and total exoneration of him. Was it?
No, of course it wasn't. I mean, if you believe that Barr accurately summarized the Mueller report, then it did say there will be no criminal charges on the Russia collusion angle. So I do think the president has good cause to be happy about that. No one will be criminally charged for that, so that's important. But it did not exonerate him on the obstruction of justice. So in fact, the words that Mueller used, according to Barr, are that he was not exonerating the president on obstruction of justice. So it certainly goes way too far for the president to say he's been completely exonerated, although no criminal charges will be filed, which is important.
Ellis, your take on the president's words?
I'm still waiting to see the Mueller report, right? I mean, we know what the Attorney General, what his view of the important points of it are. But there are some reasons to be doubtful about some of that analysis. So is this a 20-page report or a 2,000-page report? What kind of evidence does it have about the president's behavior and those of the folks around him? Boy, we got our work cut out for us for the next few months, I think.
Were you surprised, Jennifer, at how definitive the report seems to be, again, if the summary reflects the report, on the lack of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians?
Well, the issue is I'm not sure how conclusive the report is. What the report will do, I think, and we'll have to wait to see it, but it will lay out all the evidence on both sides. It will say, here's what we found. We talked to all these witnesses. We subpoenaed all these documents, and here is what we learned. Now, from that, it appears that Mueller did conclude that there was not enough evidence to bring a criminal charge. But remember, that doesn't mean that there's no evidence implicating the president or anyone else in inappropriate behavior, and the bar for criminal prosecution is very high. They would have had to find that they could prove these cases beyond a reasonable doubt. So that's very high, much higher than the standard, for example, for Congress to investigate and potentially take action. So you know, we're not all the way there, but it doesn't surprise me that Mueller is definitive in the sense of saying no criminal charges can be brought here.
And why did he punt on the issue of obstruction? I mean, wasn't that his job, to make the call?
This is the biggest mystery to me that I really don't understand. It was Mueller's job to investigate and prosecute anything that could be prosecuted. And the reason that he was appointed in the first place is because he's independent of the president. The special counsel regulations actually have as a requirement for putting a special counsel in that you have to have a conflict of interest for the Department of Justice to investigate the matter. So he is the independent person who really should be making these decisions, and no one knows these facts better than Robert Mueller. So for those two reasons, he really ought to have been the one to say, here are the facts, here's my assessment of the law, and here is, you know, did the president obstruct justice or not? So I really don't understand his decision not to do that duty.
Ellis, do you think that the issue of obstruction, the fact that he was not exonerated by Mueller. Is that a sufficient peg for the congressional Democrats to hang an impeachment on the president?
Oh, well, I hate to jump right to the politics, Rafi, but let's jump right to the politics. Because in the end, that's really what matters here, right? If we concede that it's unlikely, maybe even legally impossible to indict the president while he's in office, really it's a political equation. And I think you got to say a couple things about that. One is it was a big victory for the president, right? Because it did allow him and his supporters to claim total exoneration, even if we know that's not quite what Mueller said. But as this plays out in Congress, which is where it will go next, and into public discussions like this one, the answers are much more complicated than that. What's the evidence there? What do we learn about his behavior and those of others around him? And those things will determine how it is that this bounces in the end.
Now, Jennifer, aside from the issue of obstruction, it seems like the biggest fight that the congressional Democrats are going to take to the Attorney General is the issue of full disclosure of the report. To what degree would the Attorney General be justified to keep things away from Congress and the public, and to what degree is he obliged to present as much as possible?
Well, he's not really obliged to give anything over. Pursuant to the special counsel regs, he doesn't have to make anything public. Bill Barr has pledged to do so to the extent he can, but there are 3 buckets of information that are problematic for that. One is grand jury materials. The law says you can't just hand over grand jury materials. They are secret unless a judge says otherwise, so that's one category. Classified information is another category, right? You can't disclose that without it being unclassified, and there are probably pretty good reasons to keep some of the information about sources and methods classified here. And then there's this notion of the Department of Justice policies, which are to not disclose derogatory information about someone who is not charged.
In other words, not do a Comey like he did on Clinton.
And that's going to be a big question here, because a lot of people think it's unfair for DOJ to say, on the one hand, we're not going to charge him because of our own policy. On the other hand, we're not going to release derogatory information. And then that also, actually a 4th bucket would be executive privilege information that the White House may assert.
But despite all that, you're absolutely right on the law and the policies. This information wants to be free. Right, and there's a huge pressure to get it out there.
But look,
there's a lot of people looking for it, and it's coming out.
But listen, when Devin Nunes was chair of the Intelligence Committee in Congress, and he released the so-called Nunes memo, it was a Democrat to say, you can't. It's too risky to do that. Now, they can't go back.
It's coming. Seriously, okay. It is coming. There are some really aggressive and smart reporters who are looking for it. There are a lot of politicians who have political advantage for getting it out there. You will not keep this secret forever.
So the Democrats in Congress, and Democrats in general, seem not to be too happy about the fact that Mueller seems not to have found any reason to charge Trump and his people from colluding with the Russians. But I saw a person in the street interview where this woman said, look, I am no fan of President Trump, but I and all Americans should be glad that they didn't find collusion. Is she right?
Well, I guess that's right. And let me give you another reason that even politically ambitious Dems ought to be happy about it. We know from the public reaction to this case from the very beginning, it is not something that has animated many voters. And you come up with a list of 20 things people care about, and it's down at 18 or 19. And so if this has the effect of freeing Democrats, whether the presidential candidates or in Congress, to focus on stuff that most Americans care about, this, despite the feeling today of a little bit of deflation, it really might be a political advantage.
Jennifer, Chris Matthews said that Mueller let Trump off the hook by not insisting that he be interviewed by the Mueller investigators. Is Chris Matthews right?
It's hard to say. There's no question that they were right to ask for the interview of Trump. They eventually did get some written questions answered, but you typically don't interview the target of your investigation.
Really?
And so, especially when you start to talk about an obstruction case where Trump was unquestionably the target of that criminal investigation, common practice is you actually don't interview that person, because that person is going to take the fifth, which they should do because they're the target. So, this whole thing about the interview, I think it was really more a political issue, almost, if you will, than a legal issue, because, it looked bad. Is he going to take the fifth? That looks bad. But legally, it's really not common to get that interview, at least on the obstruction side. it's different on the so-called collusion side, but they did get at least the written questions for that.
No, Congressman Nadler, the head of the Judiciary Committee in Congress, says he's going to continue to pursue this because Mueller's report, investigation was narrow in scope. So he's going to continue to investigate Russia. We know that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan is going to be investigating other things. At what point do these investigations begin to look to Americans like the Post is being moved? When does it begin to look like Ken Starr's Inquisition of Clinton?
You know, it will depend on what facts come forward. I mean, I think it's highly likely that there are some very rich veins to explore in the behavior of Donald Trump, his company, his family members, and those around him. If 6 months from now nothing very titillating has come out and nothing very damaging has come out, then maybe it'll seem like that. But I don't think we're there yet.
You used to work at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan. What are they looking at?
Well, they're looking at a few things, right? They have the Michael Cohen matter, which encompasses the campaign finance violation, the hush money payouts to Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels, which they have already found implicates the president criminally. So that's a very interesting thing where they're going to go with that. And we know that they're not done with that yet, because even when they released the Michael Cohen search warrant materials a week and a half or so ago, they redacted out everything about that case. So they're not done with that. They have an investigation into the inaugural committee and whether foreign sources of money went in there, and also questions about how that money was spent. And then I think they're looking at things related to the Trump organization. There was the Cohen testimony about potential insurance fraud, and to me there must be other corporate areas of inquiry there: tax fraud, bank fraud, accounting fraud, and those sorts of things. So I think they're taking a hard look at all of those things, and we'll have to see what they find.
Trump should be worried.
I think he is worried. I mean, this was a very good day for him, don't get me wrong. The collusion thing was by far the worst thing that he was potentially alleged to have done, I think, but these other things are serious and they could result in legal liability.
Quickly, Ellis, a question about the media. Over the weekend, Rolling Stone's Matt Taibbi, no conservative pundit, published a scathing piece titled, "It's Official, Russiagate is this generation's WMD, Weapons of Mass Destruction." Subtitled, "The Iraq War Faceplant Damaged the Reputation of the Press. Russiagate just destroyed it." Were we in the press too invested in believing the collusion story?
I don't think so. Matt probably should take a cold shower on this one. Let's see how it looks in a couple of weeks. I mean, the underlying question here, whatever the level of criminal proof, and that's a very high standard, as we all know. But listen, this is the most serious stuff imaginable. I mean, what role did the Russians play in influencing the election? What role did the president and those around him play in encouraging or at least failing to report that? I mean, those are really, really big questions. And man, we've got to get to the bottom of them. And we may still need to get to it when the standards are a little different.
All right, we're going to have to end it there. Jennifer Ellis, thanks so much for joining us to talk about this.
Good seeing you
Thanks,
guys.